Greetings and konnichiwa, and welcome to the Onyx Tavern. This is your host, the Barkeep, bringing you podcast 71 here at the tavern, presented by Hirotaku.com. Well, first of all, happy Easter, guys, and in lieu of giving you guys an Easter egg hunt, which I don't know how we would do that, my gift to you guys on Easter is another podcast, but of course, it's going to be a podcast based on a request from one of you, the fans. So today I received, or actually a couple days ago, I received a message on the Onyx Tavern Twitter account from Jen Wynn out in Ohio. And Jen basically wants me to go ahead and talk about Kyoryuger 100 years after. Now, it's mid-April at this point, and 100 years after will not be released in Japan until June 20th, and it'll be a while before we actually get some sort of sub over here in the United States. But up until this point, we've actually seen a number of trailers and previews and some behind-the-scenes account provided by Toei. And we've gathered up some information based on this, and I want to go ahead and primarily talk about what we have learned and what my expectations are for the film, and primarily what also kind of confuses me a bit. So let's go ahead and dive into it, and Jen, I hope you enjoy my thorough commentary on a film that has not yet been released, but it's the internet, and that's what we do. So... what we know is of, obviously, other than it being 100 years from now in the future, we're going to have all 6 actors return from Kyoryuger, but instead of playing themselves, they're actually going to be playing their descendants. Now, Hollywood is guilty of this, and I guess Japan is guilty of this now as well. Because anytime in television or even films, you go back in time, your ancestors look like you. You know, Marty goes back, to the 1800s, and Seamus McFly looks exactly like him. What a coincidence. And you go into the future, your descendants look like you. Dr. Soon's descendant looks just like him. So... it's kind of a weird thing. I guess it saves on actors and all that, but I really don't like the concept. Sometimes it does work, sometimes it doesn't. And all we're really getting is we're getting the same actors, again, playing different versions of themselves in a way. Such as the actor who, I can't pronounce his name at the moment either, he's going to go ahead and play... I believe it's his son or grandson, I'm not quite sure at the moment, Daikun. And Daikun is supposed to be completely opposite from Daigo. He's supposed to be like a coward, a wimp, and so forth and all that. So the good thing is we do get variation on the personalities, and it gives the actors a chance to play the roles differently, or at least play a different role in this case. But off the bat, I really don't like this idea because... here's the main problem I have with the concept of 100 years after. Again, every time we go into a Sentai, we follow, or Power Rangers, we follow a certain story and lead to its conclusion. If we break down what Kyoryuger was about, it's about the attempted resurrection of the D-Boss and their eventual defeat in the modern day. Now, we could have had a series that talked about Torin's origins and how he developed, the Zords and how they fought the D-Boss and how he rebelled from them. But that wasn't the story we were given. We were given as they resurrected modern day, and Torin has to create a band of Kyoryugers in order to go ahead and defeat him. That's where our story is, and it ends with the defeat of the D-Boss. That's how the story ends. So the question I have for the 100 years after is... and the same question you would always ask anybody who writes a script, why today? What is significant about what happens 100 years in the future? We've already had a Hurricaneger special that happened 10 years after. Now, while I have not seen that as of yet, it's still our same characters going on another journey, going on another quest. If that's related to Hurricaneger, the original series, I'm not exactly sure. I'll have to go ahead and watch it. But the thing about 100 Years After that seems really odd is it's so far removed from the events that we were meant to follow. The resurrection and defeat of the D-Boss. Now, I'll get into the exact plot from what we know of it right now, but It just seems to me it's really odd that we're going to go this far into the future and go through the trouble of creating new characters when we could just easily go back and have the characters that we already had, because we left them off in an interesting place. If you guys recall from my Kyoryuger review when we talked about the entire series after it concluded, my biggest criticism of the characters is that they were exactly the same at the end of the series as they were at the beginning. Again, the last thing we see Ian do by himself is he's dating another girl. Well, what was Ian's character the whole series? You know, he was a hotshot, he dated pretty girls, he was cool, he was suave, that was who he was. But by the end of the series, he's still that. Nothing is different. His experiences as a Kyoryuger did not change him. Yes, he understood the value of teamwork, but everybody did. And yes, he did go ahead and accept Soji and called him, you know, by his name other than Boy or Green Boy or something. So you got a character growth there with another character, but his overall character is still the same. Nothing has changed about him. This here is a good opportunity to change that character, to make him more than what he was. The problem with having it 100 years after is that, first of all, Ian is dead, most likely. And we know that at some point he fathered the child, whether he got married or it's a bastard child or whatever. That's all we really know about what happened to Ian, unless his descendant actually goes into some sort of explanation and saying this is what my father did and things like that. But we're not really going to learn anything new about Ian from this other than his son, and this is a completely new character, somebody who's going to be different than who Ian was. But why do we care about this character? We care about Ian. He's the guy we've been watching for the last year. Why does his son matter? Because if this was a spin-off series, another series or even series of movies, then I can see, yeah, we can understand and follow this character. There's a good reason. But we're talking about somebody who's going to be on screen for about 60 minutes or so. So I just find it odd for them to go ahead and make this decision to bring the actors back to play their descendants. I mean, you could have a story about them having kids and them taking on as Kyoryuger, but for it to be 100 years after, again, they're all dead with the exception of Soji, and we'll get into that in a second. So there's no real connection between the Kyoryugers that we know and their descendants. Now, supposedly, Daigo is going to make an appearance through time travel or some means to talk to his son, I guess, and do something plot-related. I'm not exactly sure. We've seen that in previews. We do know that Soji is still alive, and he is mentoring his grandson. But beyond that, we don't really have any other information. And I guess it makes sense that Soji would be alive. He'd be like 116, something like that, which in Japan, I suppose you could live that far. And who knows what advancement in medicine is going to be next 100 years. And, of course, he is the youngest. So it does make the most sense that he would go ahead and be around. But that's the only real connection we're going to go ahead and have. Now, my original thought is it was going to be Soji who makes them the Kyoryuger. He's like the guardian of the powers or whatever and stuff like that. But that's not the case. What it appears to be is that Canderilla is now taking Torin's spot because the D-Boss or Lord Chaos is being revived. And she's taken upon herself to rebuild the Kyoryugers here in what will be the future, their present day. Now, I really like this idea of Canderilla's redemption. We see it at the end of the Kyoryuger series, but I really wish it was advanced upon more. The only thing she really says with Lucky Hero is that we're going to help humans now. So now we've brought it full circle, that we've had one Day-Boss who is defected, became good to fight the Day-Boss, and sacrificed himself, and now we have Canderilla, who in some ways was inspired, not necessarily, but she's taking on that role now. So my thought was, okay, so maybe this film is going to be about Candorilla's redemption. You know, she takes on human form now. She no longer looks like the day boss and all that, and she's able to recruit these guys, which actually would be a good premise for a spin-off series, that Lord Chaos is going to go ahead and return, and Kandorilla is now going to go ahead and lead the next generation of Kyoryuger. I really like that concept. But I don't know if that's what this movie's going to be about. It just seems that based on a few previews, that it's mainly going to be about Daikon and him learning to be a leader, is what it seems to go ahead and be. And actually, I want to get to this point because I mentioned this in the Kyoryuger series review, because of course the biggest controversy that everybody has, other than Daigo still in the spotlight, is that Daigo and Amy got together at the end of the series. Well, this movie essentially proves that yes, they did get married and they did have children. Or I suppose they just had children, because who knows if they were married and whatever. And of course their descendants look exactly like them. And I wonder... now, the movie's written by the lead writer of Kyoryuger, named Riku Sanjo. And Sanjo, you know, what he did with this, I would think, is that he knew he was getting a movie. Because I do believe the movie was announced even before the series ended. And he probably wanted a brother-sister dynamic on the team, and found a way to do that with Daigo and Amy. So it kind of feels like maybe that was shoehorned into Kyoryuger, that they weren't supposed to do this, but when he got the idea of a movie, he's like, okay, I'm going to go ahead and put this in there because I want to do this, do that. Because again, what does Amy and Daigo getting married in the series actually accomplish? It really should have been Daigo and Yayoi, since she was actually fawning over him the entire time. But like I said, it's between a brilliant cute girl and a rich cute girl. So... pick your poison, I guess. And that's kind of what I think is like, it even said, even in the movie, it's like the day boss has a greater villain. So I wonder, I mean, a greater leader. So I wonder if that line was even written in there to justify this film, that not only is Chaos coming back, but maybe the actual day boss master, again, 100 years from now and so forth. So, and again, I wonder if that's what the actual plot of the movie is, because it seems to me it could be one of three things, or all three. Again, the redemption of Candorilla, Daikon as the leader of the Kyoryuger, and the threat of the master Deboss, I guess is what we'll call him, or Deboss from space, coming back to, you know, go ahead and try to take over the world again. I just don't think that is enough to really justify it being 100 years after. Now, I could be completely wrong, and I may go ahead and love this movie, but I just find that you could do something with your established characters. Now, granted, this is something different. I don't think we've ever gone this far in the future outside of Time Ranger. But of course, it's one of those little fickle things that I really want to know what the production design is going to go ahead and be. How do they portray Japan 100 years from now? The lingo, the clothing. That kind of stuff is ultimately going to go ahead and bother me, because that bothers me with any television show that attempts to tell the future. I mean, heck, why do you think Star Trek was never on Earth for the majority of its run? Is because they really didn't have a way to think about that. They knew what it was like in space, but on Earth it's a little bit trickier. And yes, they have been to Earth in the 23rd, 22nd, 24th centuries. They have, but it was always limited, basically. The other issue that I take up with this... Now, the thing is, we know that there are 11 Kyoryuger powers. Death Ranger, of course, being Navy Ranger, and that's what Daikon's going to be. He's going to be a modified version of the Death Ranger, and just going to be Kyu Navy. Which I think is cool, you know, because, heck, we paid for it in the movie. Might as well get use out of it, right? But each one of them is going to be a different color than their ancestors. The leader's going to be navy, the girl's going to be cyan, and you know, it's just different colors. I mean, navy, blue, cyan, gray, violet, silver, which, by the way, is probably the dullest and ugliest looking color scheme, but I like the fact that they're doing something new with it. Except what bothers me about this change is that it seems that by the end of the film, that the climax is going to be that they're going to assume the powers of their direct ancestors. So, for example, the Daikon Navy Ranger is going to assume the powers of Kyu-Red, his grandfather. Again, I'm not sure if it's the first generation or the second generation. And they're going to turn into what we perceive as the modern-day Kyoryugers: red, blue, pink, green, black, and gold. Now, why is that exactly? Are they going to lose their powers? Are their Zords going to be destroyed and they have to assume the new ones? Because unlike Super Mega Force, you typically assume new powers because either A, they're more powerful, and B, those powers are the previous powers are inaccessible or destroyed. So does that mean that Brigigus and Pelzon and Keladon are all going to be destroyed? Are they going to be captured? It raises a couple of questions here, because I guess my initial thought was, okay, so they're going to be these different colors, and maybe the original team is going to come back in and they're going to like team up, because I would assume there would be some sort of time travel, and you could probably get away with a couple of good effects with the same actor talking to each other. That's usually a lot of fun. That doesn't seem to necessarily be the case. And I will also say that Kyu Blue's descendant is also going to be the same Blue Ranger. So it seems like the blue powers are passed through his lineage, but the others are not. Because, again, Canderella seems to be the one giving them powers. It's not passed down from their family exactly. Like, here, son, if the day comes, I need you to use this gun and battery. You know, that's not really how this seems to go ahead and work. The Canderella is going to give the powers, so I don't understand, again, one, the distribution of the powers, and then second of all, why this would why it would be necessary for them to become the modern-day Kyoryugers by the end. So, I don't know really what to think about this film. You know, I mean, we've seen the previews. I've gone over the things that we do know, that we have seen. And I just don't know what to go ahead and really think about, except that I don't understand why they're doing it 100 years from now. What I would like to think is that the story they're going to tell can only be told 100 years from now. That's what I would like to think, that's why they're doing this. Because if the story ultimately boils down to the fact that you could do it the modern Kyoryuger, then it will be a waste. But if there is something significant about the film that speaks to the past Kyoryuger team, or even Sentai as a whole, then I think it would be interesting. Because, you know, I guess the thing is like the Kyoryugers, and I guess this bugs me overall about any Sentai Power Ranger team, is that they have a specific enemy that they're fighting, and they only fight that enemy. So, let me put it in this context. The Kyoryugers fight the Dead Boss army. The film is about the Dead Boss returning again. So, theoretically, between the end of Kyoryuger and the 100 years after, they don't do any other fighting, with the exception of whatever future crossover we're going to get with Kyoryuger, of course. But speaking of Kyoryuger, the Kyoryugers do not in any way help them in their battle, which is happening concurrently, by the way, with the Shadow Line, even though they do have their powers still. I believe that's right. Yeah, they do, because their Zords are still around, so they should still be able to go ahead and access them. So, again, it's just like the whole premise is based on the Dead Boss returning, as opposed to the Kyoryugers being continuous superheroes and saving the world from future threats. Because the way I'm looking at it, there are 100 different Sentai teams between Kyoryuger and this year, and the Kyoryugers are not going to do anything in the intervening 100 years other than help the Kyoryuger, and probably appearing in the 50th anniversary, the 100th anniversary Sentai War. I don't know. It just seems very perplexing to me. So, I guess those are all my thoughts on. I know, as usual, I'm all over the place, but hey, I don't script these. I just go and talk about them. But I would say I'm looking forward to it, because I did like Kyoryuger. I'd like to see what they're going to do with this premise. And if it actually has any long-lasting effects, because typically the movies don't mean anything out of continuity, particularly the ones that happen after the series ends. But I want to see what this gives to Sentai as a whole. Maybe maybe depending on how successful this movie is, they'll try something new with Kyoryuger. You know, I'm not like 100 years after, but do a different type of, you know, summer blockbuster type of movie. They'll actually just do something, again, that's interesting. And again, I'm not faulting them for doing something out of the norm. I mean, that's what Go Buster did, and unfortunately that failed miserably, it seems. I like it when they try something new, but again, I want a good reason for why they're doing this. What is the justification for being 100 years in the future? That's ultimately what I want to see answered within the film, and I hope we get that. Well, I think I've taken enough of your guys' time, so I want to thank you all for joining me. I want to thank Jen Win again for submitting this question. And again, if you guys have any questions that you would like me to go ahead and discuss in detail at the tavern, whether by myself or with Raptor and D Jedi, again, please leave a message over at the Onyx Tavern Facebook page or over at Twitter at the Onyx Tavern or hashtag the Onyx Tavern. But I want to thank you guys for listening. Have a good day. Go get those Jesus eggs. And the tavern is now closed.